The stagecoach lurched to a halt in front of the dusty station in Santa Fe, New Mexico territory, and Clara Catherine Caldwell pressed a trembling hand against her bruised cheekbone, hoping the powder she had applied that morning still concealed the worst of the purple discoloration that spread from her eye socket to her jawline. It was August 1885, and the desert heat bore down mercilessly on the small territorial town, shimmering off the adobe buildings and making the air itself seem to waver like water. Clara had traveled nearly 2,000 miles from Boston to meet a man she had never seen, responding to an advertisement that promised respect, security, and a new life far from the one that had nearly destroyed her. Her hands shook as she smoothed down her traveling dress, a modest gray cotton that had seen better days, and prepared herself to meet Russell Theodore Davis, the rancher who had answered her letter with words so kind she had read them until the paper grew soft and worn. The driver opened the door and offered his weathered hand. Clara took it, stepping down onto the wooden platform with legs that felt unsteady after 3 weeks of travel. The powder had not held. She could feel it cracking along her cheek, and when she caught her reflection in the station window, she saw what she had feared. The vivid purple and yellow bruise bloomed across her face like some grotesque flower, impossible to ignore. "Miss Caldwell." A deep voice spoke from behind her, and Clara turned slowly, her heart hammering against her ribs. The man standing before her was tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-weathered skin and dark hair that fell just past his collar. His eyes were a startling shade of gray, like storm clouds gathering over distant mountains, and they widened almost imperceptibly as they took in her face. He was perhaps 30 years old, dressed in worn denim, and a clean white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. His hands, large and calloused, held his hat respectfully against his chest. "Mr. Davis," Clara managed, though her voice came out smaller than she intended. Russell Davis did not speak immediately. His eyes moved from her bruised face to her eyes, which she knew were red-rimmed from crying and lack of sleep, and then down to her hands, which clutched her worn carpet bag like a lifeline. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and steady, but there was an edge of barely controlled anger beneath it that made Clara take an involuntary step backward. "That ends today," he said simply, and the words carried the weight of an unbreakable vow. Clara felt tears prick at her eyes, and she blinked rapidly, determined not to cry in front of this stranger who was supposed to become her husband. "I apologize for my appearance. The journey was difficult." "Do not apologize to me," Russell said, his jaw tightening. "Not for that. Never for that." He took a breath, visibly collecting himself, and when he spoke again, his tone was gentler. "I have a wagon just down the street. My ranch is about an hour outside of town. If you are too tired from traveling, I can arrange a room at the hotel and we can make the journey tomorrow." "I would prefer to continue if that is acceptable," Clara said quickly. The thought of spending another night alone with her thoughts, with the memories that chased her from Boston, was unbearable. She needed to keep moving forward, to leave the past as far behind as possible. Russell nodded and reached for her bag. "May I?" She surrendered it, grateful for the small courtesy. He gestured for her to walk beside him, and they moved through the dusty street together. Santa Fe bustled with afternoon activity despite the heat. Mexican women in colorful skirts carried baskets of vegetables toward the market square. Cowboys led horses toward the livery. A group of Apache traders had set up blankets displaying silver jewelry and woven goods near the old plaza. The town was a mixture of cultures and languages, Spanish and English and indigenous tongues, blending in the air along with the scent of chili peppers roasting somewhere nearby. Russell's wagon was indeed just down the street, hitched to two sturdy horses that stamped their feet and swished their tails against the persistent flies. He placed her bag in the back with practiced efficiency, and then turned to help her up onto the seat. His hands were gentle but impersonal as he lifted her, and Clara found herself grateful for his restraint. She had feared, during the long journey west, that she might be trading one nightmare for another. They rode in silence for the first 15 minutes, leaving the town behind and heading into the open country. The landscape was unlike anything Clara had known in Boston. Red earth stretched toward distant mesas, dotted with sage and juniper. The sky was so vast it seemed to swallow everything beneath it, an endless blue canopy broken only by a hawk circling lazily on thermal currents. The heat was dry and intense, so different from the humid summers of her childhood. "I should tell you," Russell finally said, his eyes fixed on the road ahead, "that I am not a man who believes in pretense or unnecessary conversation. But I need to know if you are in danger, if someone followed you, if I need to be prepared for trouble." Clara had prepared several responses to potential questions during her journey. She had imagined elaborate lies, partial truths, carefully constructed stories that would explain without revealing too much. But sitting beside this quiet man with the storm cloud eyes, she found she could not bear to start their arrangement with dishonesty. "My brother-in-law," she said quietly. "My sister died in childbirth 2 years ago. I went to live with him because I had nowhere else to go. He was kind at first. But then the kindness changed into something else, something wrong. When I refused his advances, he became violent. I saved every penny I could from the sewing work I did, and when I saw your advertisement, I answered it. He does not know where I have gone. I told no one except my employer, who helped me secure the train tickets and promised to say nothing." Russell's hands tightened on the reins until his knuckles went white. "His name? Why? So if he ever shows his face on my land, I will know who needs to be dealt with." "Frederick Carlyle," Clara said, "but I do not believe he will come. He is a respected banker in Boston. He would not risk his reputation by following a penniless woman across the country." "Men who hurt women are cowards," Russell said flatly. "And cowards do not care about much beyond their own desires. But you are right that the distance is considerable. Still, I want you to know that on my ranch, you are safe. I have 3 men who work for me. Miguel, who has been with me since I started the ranch 5 years ago, his younger brother Carlos, and an older man named Jim Hawkins who used to prospect for silver and decided he preferred cattle. They are good men. They will not bother you, and if anyone else tries, they will handle it." "Thank you," Clara whispered. The tightness in her chest eased slightly. "I should also tell you that I am not expecting anything from this arrangement beyond what was stated in your letters. I understand this is a business proposition. You need someone to manage your household, and I need security and a place to live. I will work hard. I know how to cook and clean and mend. I can keep accounts and manage supplies. I will not be a burden to you." Russell glanced at her then, and something in his expression softened. "I did not send for a servant, Miss Caldwell. I sent for a wife. The reasons may be practical, but that does not mean I intend to treat you as less than what you are." "And what am I?" The question escaped before Clara could stop it. "A woman who had the courage to travel 2,000 miles alone to escape something terrible," Russell said. "That takes strength. I respect strength." They fell silent again, but this time the quiet felt less strained. Clara studied the landscape, trying to absorb the strangeness of it all. In Boston, even in the poorest neighborhoods, there were always buildings, always people pressed close together. Here, the emptiness was almost overwhelming. She could see for miles in every direction, and there was nothing but earth and sky and the occasional rock formation breaking the horizon. "It is very different from what I am accustomed to," she ventured. "I imagine so," Russell agreed. "Santa Fe is rough compared to Boston, and my ranch is even more isolated. The nearest neighbor is 6 miles east. We go into town once a week for supplies and church on Sundays, though I confess I am not the most devout man you will meet. But Mrs. Henderson, the banker's wife, runs a ladies' society that meets every Thursday. She is a kind woman. I think you would like her." "I would appreciate that," Clara said. "Female companionship has been scarce these past 2 years." The ranch appeared gradually, emerging from the landscape like something that had grown there naturally. The main house was adobe, low and spreading, with a covered porch that wrapped around 3 sides. There was a barn, a smaller bunkhouse for the ranch hands, and several corrals where horses moved lazily in the heat. A vegetable garden struggled valiantly against the dry soil behind the house, and chickens pecked at the dirt near a small coop. As they approached, 3 men emerged from various parts of the ranch, clearly having heard the wagon. The eldest was gray-haired and bow-legged, his face deeply lined from decades in the sun. The other 2 were younger, dark-haired and brown-skinned, clearly brothers as Russell had said. All 3 removed their hats as the wagon stopped. "Miguel, Carlos, Jim," Russell said, jumping down and moving around to help Clara descend. "This is Miss Clara Caldwell. We will be married by the circuit judge when he comes through next week. Until then, I would appreciate your discretion and respect." Miguel, the older of the 2 brothers, nodded seriously. "Welcome, Señorita. If you need anything, you have only to ask." "Thank you," Clara said, managing a small smile despite her exhaustion and nervousness. Jim Hawkins squinted at her bruised face but said nothing, though his jaw tightened much like Russell's had. Carlos, who could not have been more than 20, looked quickly away as if embarrassed to have noticed. "I will show you the house," Russell said, taking her bag again. "Miguel, can you see to the horses?" "Of course, patron." The inside of the house was cooler than Clara had expected, the thick adobe walls keeping out the worst of the heat. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a large fireplace, a rough-hewn table with 6 chairs, and a surprisingly comfortable-looking sofa covered in faded fabric. There were 2 doors leading off the main room, and a ladder leading up to what appeared to be a loft. "That door leads to my room," Russell said, pointing to the right. "And that one leads to what I have been using for storage, but I cleared it out this past week. It is yours. There is a bed and a dresser, and I brought down some curtains that belonged to my mother." "I apologize that it is not more comfortable." "It is more than adequate," Clara said, genuinely surprised. She had not known what to expect, but the house was clean and well-maintained if sparse. "Thank you for preparing it. I will bring you some water for washing," Russell said. "And then I thought we might talk about supper. I should confess that my cooking is edible but not enjoyable. I have been looking forward to having someone with actual skill in the kitchen." Despite everything, Clara felt a smile tug at her lips. "I am quite competent, I assure you. If you have supplies, I can prepare something this evening." "I would be grateful," Russell said. "But first you should rest. You have been traveling for weeks. Supper can wait an hour or 2. Clara nodded and moved toward the room that was to be hers. It was small but clean, with a narrow bed covered in a faded quilt, a simple dresser, and a window that looked out toward the mountains in the distance. The curtains Russell had mentioned were blue calico, cheerful and feminine. She set down her bag and sat carefully on the edge of the bed, her whole body suddenly heavy with exhaustion. True to his word, Russell appeared a few minutes later with a pitcher of water and a basin. "I will leave you to rest," he said, setting them on the dresser. He paused at the door, his back to her. "Miss Caldwell, I meant what I said earlier. That ends today. You are safe here, I give you my word." "Why?" Clara asked, the question that had been building since they met finally breaking free. "Why would you care? You do not know me." "I am just a stranger who answered your advertisement." Russell turned to face her then, and his expression was serious. "My mother," he said quietly, "was married to my father for 23 years. He was not a kind man, particularly when he drank, which was often. She had nowhere to go, no money of her own, no family who would help her. She endured because she believed she had no choice. When she finally died 3 years ago, I swore that if I ever had the power to prevent another woman from suffering that way, I would do it. So you see, Miss Caldwell, it is not charity. It is a debt I owe to a woman I could not save." Before Clara could respond, he left, closing the door softly behind him. She sat in the quiet room, feeling something shift in her chest. This man, this stranger who had agreed to marry her sight unseen, was far more complex than she had anticipated. She had expected either a rough, uncultured cowboy interested only in having a woman to cook and warm his bed, or perhaps someone socially awkward who could not find a wife through conventional means. Russell Davis seemed to be neither of those things. Clara washed her face and hands in the basin, wincing as the cloth touched her bruised cheek. The swelling had gone down considerably during the journey, but the discoloration would take at least another week to fade completely. She unpinned her hair and ran her fingers through it, trying to work out some of the tangles from travel. In her bag, she found a clean dress and changed out of her dusty traveling clothes, immediately feeling more human. She lay down on the bed, intending to rest for only a few minutes, but exhaustion claimed her immediately. When she woke, the light outside her window had shifted to the golden amber of late afternoon. She could hear voices outside, male laughter and the sound of horses. For a moment, she could not remember where she was, and panic fluttered in her chest. Then memory returned, and with it a strange sense of relief. Clara stood and smoothed her dress, then ventured out into the main room. It was empty, but she could see through the window that Russell and his men were working with horses in one of the corrals. She moved to the kitchen area and began taking stock of what was available. There were provisions, more than she had expected. Flour, cornmeal, beans, salt pork, dried chilies, coffee, sugar, even some tinned vegetables. An honest assessment of the supplies told her that Russell had been preparing for her arrival for some time. She had just started a fire in the stove when the door opened behind her. She turned to find Russell standing in the doorway, his shirt damp with sweat, his hair disheveled. He looked uncertain, as if unsure whether to enter his own home. "I apologize," he said. "I did not mean to disturb you. I just wanted to check if you needed anything." "I am fine," Clara said. "I was going to make cornbread and beans with some of the salt pork. Is that acceptable?" "More than acceptable," Russell said. "But you do not have to cook if you are still tired." "I would prefer to be useful," Clara said honestly. "I have been idle for too long during the journey." "It feels good to have purpose again." Russell nodded. "Then I will leave you to it. I need to wash up. We usually eat around sunset, but take whatever time you need." He disappeared back outside, and Clara set to work. Cooking had always calmed her, the familiar motions and the transformation of raw ingredients into something nourishing and good. She made the cornbread with practiced efficiency, mixing in some dried peppers she found hanging from the rafters to give it flavor. The beans she seasoned with onion and garlic, and a bit of the salt pork, the way her mother had taught her years ago. By the time the men came in for supper, the table was set and the food was ready. "Jim," Miguel and Carlos entered first, clean but still dusty from the day's work. They took seats at the table with murmured thanks. Russell came in last, his hair wet from washing, wearing a clean shirt. His eyes went to the table, taking in the spread Clara had managed, and something like wonder crossed his face. "This looks incredible," he said. "It is simple food," Clara said, suddenly nervous. "Nothing fancy." "Simple food prepared well is better than fancy food done poorly," Miguel said with authority. "May we eat, patron?" "Of course," Russell said, taking his seat at the head of the table. Clara sat at the other end, unsure of the protocol. The meal was quiet at first, the men focused on eating. But gradually, conversation began to flow. Miguel and Carlos discussed a section of fence that needed repair. Jim mentioned that one of the mares looked ready to foal. Russell listened to all of it, occasionally asking questions or offering instructions. Clara mostly observed, learning the rhythms of this new place. "Señorita Caldwell," Miguel said, looking at her with kind eyes, "this cornbread is excellent. My mother used to make it with peppers just like this. It reminds me of home." "Where is home?" Clara asked. "A small village in Chihuahua," Miguel said. "Carlos and I came north 10 years ago looking for work. Mr. Davis was the first man who treated us fairly." "They were the first men who knew the difference between a cow and a steer," Russell said dryly, and the table erupted in laughter. Clara found herself smiling, then nearly laughing. The warmth and easy camaraderie around the table was so foreign to her experience of the past 2 years that it felt almost unreal. In Frederick's house, meals had been tense, silent affairs where she ate quickly and escaped as soon as possible. After supper, the ranch hands excused themselves to the bunkhouse. Russell began clearing the table, but Clara stopped him. "Please let me. You have been working all day." "So have you," Russell pointed out. "You traveled and then cooked for 5 men." "4 men," Clara corrected. "I do not think I count." "You count," Russell said firmly. Then, more gently, "But if you prefer to clean up alone, I will respect that. I have some account books I need to review anyway." He moved to the sofa and retrieved a ledger from a side table, settling in to work. Clara washed the dishes in a basin, her hands moving through the familiar motions while her mind wandered. Through the window above the basin, she could see the sun setting over the distant mesas, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that took her breath away. In Boston, sunsets had been obscured by buildings and smoke. Here, the sky was everything. "It is beautiful, is it not?" Russell's voice came from behind her, and she realized he had been watching her watch the sunset. "Extraordinary," Clara agreed. "I have never seen anything like it." "That was what convinced me to stay," Russell said. "I came out here 5 years ago with almost nothing. I had saved some money from working on other people's ranches, enough to buy a small herd and file a claim on this land. The first year was brutal. I nearly gave up a dozen times. But then I would see a sunset like that, or the way the stars look out here at night, and I would remember why I came. Freedom. Space. The chance to build something that belonged to me. It must have taken tremendous courage," Clara said, turning to face him. "To leave everything familiar and start over in such a harsh place. No more courage than it took for you to travel 2,000 miles alone," Russell said. His eyes held hers, and Clara felt something flutter in her chest, some emotion she could not quite name. She looked away first, uncomfortable with the intensity of his gaze. "I should finish these dishes." "Of course," Russell said, returning to his ledger. They worked in companionable silence for a while, the quiet broken only by the scratch of Russell's pen and the soft splash of water as Clara washed. When she finished, she dried her hands and stood uncertainly in the middle of the room, unsure what to do next. "You read." Russell asked, looking up from his accounts. Yes, Clara said, surprised. I love reading, though I have not had much opportunity lately. Russell stood and crossed to a trunk against one wall. He opened it and pulled out several books, their covers worn but intact. These were my mother's. She loved novels, especially adventure stories. I am not much of a reader myself, but I kept them for sentimental reasons. You are welcome to any of them. Clara took the books he offered, running her fingers over the spines reverently. Thank you. This is very kind. It is practical, Russell said with a slight smile. The evenings here are long and quiet. You will want something to occupy your time. They stood there for a moment, neither quite sure how to proceed. Finally, Russell cleared his throat. I should probably explain the sleeping arrangements more clearly. I know that we are to be married, but I do not expect anything from you until you are ready. That room is yours alone. I will not enter it without permission. We can have the ceremony next week when Judge Harrison comes through on his circuit, but the marriage does not have to be anything more than legal protection until you decide otherwise. Do you understand? Clara felt tears prick at her eyes again, moved by his consideration. I understand. Thank you. You do not need to thank me for basic decency, Russell said, but his voice was gentle. You have had a long day. You should rest. Clara nodded and retreated to her room, closing the door behind her. She set the books on the dresser and sat on the edge of the bed, trying to process everything that had happened. This morning, she had been a terrified woman arriving in a strange town to meet a strange man, certain she was making a terrible mistake. Now, she was in a small adobe ranch house in the New Mexico territory, preparing to marry a man who seemed determined to protect her without asking anything in return. She changed into her nightgown and lay down, expecting sleep to evade her as it had for so many nights. But the bed was surprisingly comfortable, and the house was quiet except for the occasional creak of settling wood and the distant call of coyotes. Clara's eyes grew heavy, and for the first time in 2 years, she fell asleep without fear. The next week passed in a blur of new routines and gradual adjustment. Clara woke early each morning, well before dawn, and started coffee for Russell and the ranch hands. She made breakfast, hearty meals of eggs and bacon and biscuits that the men devoured with obvious appreciation. During the day, while the men worked with the cattle and horses, she cleaned the house, tended the vegetable garden, and began taking stock of everything that needed repair or replacement. The house had clearly been maintained by men with limited domestic skills. Curtains were torn, clothes needed mending, and the lack of organization in the storage areas bordered on chaotic. Clara threw herself into the work with determination, grateful for the distraction and the purpose. She found herself humming while she worked, something she had not done in years. Russell was gone most of each day, working on the range with his men. But he always appeared for meals, and in the evenings after supper they had begun to talk. The conversation started tentatively, small exchanges about the day or the weather, but gradually they deepened. Russell told her about his childhood in Missouri, about his difficult father and gentle mother, about his decision to come west after both parents died. Clara found herself sharing stories from her own past, carefully edited to avoid the painful parts. She told him about her sister Anne, about their childhood in a small town outside Boston, about the dreams they had shared before everything fell apart. "What did you want to be?" Russell asked one evening as they sat on the porch watching another spectacular sunset. "Before life changed your plans." Clara thought about it, surprised to find the memories were not as painful as they once had been. "I wanted to be a teacher. I love children and I love books. It seemed like the perfect combination. But women teachers are expected to be unmarried, and when my parents died and Anne married Frederick, I had to find work that would allow me to live with them. So I became a seamstress instead." "You could still teach," Russell said. "Santa Fe has a small school, but they are always looking for help. And out here, many children are taught at home by their mothers. You could offer lessons." "Perhaps someday," Clara said, not wanting to commit to something that felt too much like hope. On Sunday, Russell drove her into town for church. The small Catholic mission was cool and dim, filled with the scent of incense and candles. Most of the congregation was Mexican or Apache, with a scattering of Anglo settlers. Clara felt conspicuous in her plain dress, but several women smiled at her warmly. After the service, Russell introduced her to Mrs. Margaret Henderson, the banker's wife he had mentioned. She was a plump, cheerful woman in her 50s with kind eyes and an energetic manner. "My dear girl," Mrs. Henderson said, taking both of Clara's hands in hers, "Russell has told me so much about you. We are delighted to have another educated woman in town. You must come to our Thursday society meetings. We discuss books and organize charity work, and honestly, it is mostly an excuse to have tea and gossip." "I would like that very much," Clara said, warming to the woman immediately. "Excellent," Mrs. Henderson declared. "And I heard Judge Harrison will be here Tuesday." How exciting to have a wedding to celebrate. Clara glanced at Russell, who looked slightly uncomfortable with the attention but nodded. "We would be honored if you and your husband would stand as witnesses." "We would be delighted," Mrs. Henderson said. "Oh, this is wonderful. We have had far too few happy occasions lately." On the way back to the ranch, Clara was quiet, processing the morning. Russell glanced at her several times but did not press her to talk. Finally, as they turned onto the road leading to his land, she spoke. "Are you certain about this?" she asked. "About marrying me? You barely know me. I could be anyone." Russell was silent for a long moment, his hands steady on the reins. "I have been alone for a long time," he finally said. "By choice, mostly. After watching my parents' marriage, I was not sure I wanted to risk that kind of unhappiness. But loneliness is its own kind of unhappiness. When I put that advertisement in the paper, I told myself it was practical. I needed help with the household, and there are not many unmarried women in Santa Fe. But the truth is, I wanted someone to share this with. The sunsets, the work, the satisfaction of building something. I cannot promise you romantic love, Miss Caldwell, but I can promise you respect and partnership, and I hope that is enough." "It is more than enough," Clara said softly. "It is more than I dared hope for." Tuesday arrived with clear skies and a gentle breeze that offered slight relief from the August heat. Judge Harrison arrived in town mid-morning, and Russell and Clara met him at the courthouse, along with Mr. and Mrs. Henderson. The ceremony was brief and businesslike, the judge reading the legal words in a bored monotone while Clara and Russell stood side by side. When instructed to do so, Russell slipped a simple gold band onto Clara's finger. She looked at it in surprise, having not expected a ring. "It was my mother's," Russell murmured. "I hope you do not mind." "It is perfect," Clara whispered back, touched beyond words. "You may kiss your bride," Judge Harrison announced, already gathering his papers to move on to his next appointment. Russell looked at Clara, a question in his eyes. She nodded slightly, and he leaned down to brush his lips across hers, so gentle and brief that it was over almost before it began. But Clara felt it like a spark, a promise of something that could grow given time and care. Mrs. Henderson insisted on providing a small celebration lunch at her home, and Clara found herself in a bright dining room eating sandwiches and cake, while Margaret chattered happily about the latest town gossip. Mr. Henderson, a quiet man with serious eyes, congratulated Russell warmly, and told Clara she was welcome at the bank anytime she needed anything. By the time they returned to the ranch, it was late afternoon. Clara changed out of her good dress and into her work clothes, feeling strange about the gold band on her finger. She was married, legally bound to a man she had known for 1 week. The thought should have terrified her, but instead, she felt something like peace. Russell found her in the garden, pulling weeds in the relative cool of the approaching evening. "You do not have to work today," he said. "It is your wedding day." "Every day is a working day on a ranch," Clara replied, smiling up at him. "Besides, I like the garden. It is peaceful." Russell crouched beside her, examining the vegetables. "You have done wonders with this. I could never keep anything alive out here. My mother tried to teach me, but I do not have her gift." "It just takes patience and attention," Clara said. "The soil is difficult, but not impossible. I was thinking I might try to start some herbs too, for cooking." "Whatever you want," Russell said. "This is your home now. Change anything you like." The word home settled into Clara's chest with surprising warmth. She had not had a real home since her parents died. Frederick's house had been a prison, not a home. But this small adobe ranch house, stark and simple as it was, felt like it could become something precious. That night after supper, Russell asked if she would like to walk with him. They strolled around the ranch as the sun set, Russell pointing out various features and future plans. He wanted to expand the herd, to build a larger barn, to possibly add rooms onto the house if the ranch continued to prosper. Clara listened, asking questions and offering thoughts, feeling like a true partner in the enterprise. "I have been thinking," Russell said as they paused near one of the corrals, "about what you said about teaching. Jim cannot read. He is self-conscious about it, but mentioned once that he wishes he had learned. And Carlos reads Spanish but struggles with English. If you were willing, I think they would appreciate lessons." And Miguel mentioned that his wife and children might come north to join him if things continue to go well. "His oldest is 7. She would benefit from instruction." "I would love to teach them," Clara said, excitement bubbling up. "Truly, it would give me such joy." "Then it is settled," Russell said. "We can start whenever you are ready." They stood together in the gathering darkness, the sky above them beginning to fill with stars. Clara had never seen so many stars, brilliant and countless against the black velvet of night. "The sky is incredible here," she breathed. "I told you," Russell said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "There is nowhere else like this." As the weeks passed, life on the ranch settled into a comfortable rhythm. Clara began teaching Jim and Carlos in the evenings after supper, using some of Russell's mother's books and a slate she found in the storage room. Jim proved to be a diligent if slow student, painstakingly forming letters and sounding out words with fierce determination. Carlos learned more quickly, his young mind absorbing English with enthusiasm. Clara also threw herself into improving the ranch house. She sewed new curtains for every window, repaired all the torn clothing, and organized the storage room until everything had its proper place. She experimented with the limited ingredients available, learning to cook with chilies and corn and beans in ways she never had in Boston. Russell and the men praised every meal lavishly, even the failures, which only encouraged her to try harder. The Thursday society meetings became a highlight of Clara's week. The group consisted of about 8 women of varying ages and backgrounds. There was Mrs. Henderson, of course, who led the meetings with cheerful authority. There was Rosa Martinez, whose husband owned the general store, and her sister Elena. There were 2 younger women, Sarah Collins and Emma Wright, both wives of ranchers like Russell. And there was an older Apache woman named Desba who had married a French trader and spoke 4 languages fluently. They discussed books, shared recipes, organized charity for families in need, and yes, gossiped, though generally in kind ways. It was at one of these meetings, about 6 weeks after Clara's arrival, that the comfortable life she was building was threatened. The women were discussing plans for a harvest festival when Mrs. Henderson's housemaid entered the parlor looking nervous. "Begging your pardon, madam, but there is a gentleman here asking after a Miss Clara Caldwell. Says he has come all the way from Boston to find her." The blood drained from Clara's face. She stood so abruptly that her teacup clattered against its saucer. "What does he look like?" The maid described Frederick Carlyle perfectly, down to his expensive suit and gold watch chain. "Tell him she is not here," Mrs. Henderson said immediately, her eyes sharp. "Tell him you have never heard of anyone by that name." "But, madam, he seems quite insistent." "Then tell him to take his insistence and leave my property," Mrs. Henderson said firmly. "Go on now." The maid scurried away. The other women looked at Clara with concern and curiosity. Clara sank back into her chair, trembling. "I am sorry," she managed. "I should leave before I bring trouble to your home." "You will do no such thing," Mrs. Henderson declared. "Rosa, go find Sheriff Martinez and tell him we have a situation. Elena, help me lock the doors. Clara, dear, come sit down and tell us what this is about." So Clara told them. She told them about Frederick, about her sister's death, about the months of unwanted attention that had escalated into violence. She told them about saving money and fleeing west, about answering Russell's advertisement out of desperation. As she spoke, she watched their faces, expecting judgment or pity or rejection. Instead, she saw anger, not directed at her but burning bright and fierce on her behalf. "Men like that," Desba said quietly when Clara finished. "They believe women are property, to be used and discarded." "It is not just white men. I have known Apache men like this too, my own first husband. But there are also good men who understand that women are people, with the same right to safety and choice. You have found such a man in Russell Davis." "Frederick cannot take you back," Sarah said firmly. "You are married now. You belong to yourself and to Russell, not to him." "The law does not always protect women the way it should," Emma added, "but we do, all of us. If this man thinks he can waltz into Santa Fe and drag you away, he is about to learn otherwise." Clara felt tears streaming down her face, overwhelmed by their immediate and unconditional support. These women, some of whom she had known for only a few weeks, were ready to stand between her and harm without hesitation. Sheriff Martinez arrived within the hour, a burly man with a thick mustache and kind eyes. Rosa's husband, Clara realized. He listened to Clara's story with growing anger, his expression darkening. "I will go speak with this Carlyle fellow," he said. "Make it clear he is not welcome in Santa Fe. But Miss Clara, you should probably stay here for a while, and I should send someone to fetch your husband." "I am not Miss Clara," Clara said softly. "I am Mrs. Davis now." "Exactly right," Sheriff Martinez said with approval. "And Mr. Davis should know about this situation immediately." A boy was dispatched to the ranch, and Clara waited in Mrs. Henderson's parlor, surrounded by women who had become friends. She had never felt so protected, so valued in her entire life. These women, this community, had welcomed her and now defended her without question. It was almost too much to comprehend. Russell arrived within an hour, riding hard and fast. He burst through the Hendersons' door with wild eyes, his hand on his revolver. "Where is she? Where is Clara?" "I am here," Clara said, standing. "I am safe." Russell crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "When the boy said someone from Boston was looking for you, I thought." He did not finish the sentence, just held her tighter. Clara felt something crack open in her chest, some last wall she had been maintaining. She wrapped her arms around Russell's waist and buried her face against his chest, breathing in the scent of him, leather and horses and desert sun. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I brought danger to your door." "Our door," Russell corrected, pulling back to look at her face. His hands came up to frame her cheeks, gentle despite the intensity of his grip. "You brought nothing but light to my life, Clara. This man, this threat, that is his doing, not yours. Do you understand?" Clara nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. "Good," Russell said. He turned to Sheriff Martinez. "Where is he?" "I sent him away," the sheriff said. "Told him Clara Caldwell does not exist in Santa Fe, only Mrs. Clara Davis, a married woman under her husband's protection. Told him that bothering married women is a crime in this territory, and that if he was smart, he would get on the next stage east." "And if he is not smart?" Russell asked, his voice cold. "Then I will arrest him," Sheriff Martinez said simply. "And if he resists arrest, well, accidents happen." Russell nodded slowly. "Thank you, Sheriff. I appreciate your help, but I think I need to make certain he understands the situation clearly." "Russell," Clara said urgently, gripping his arm, "please do not do anything rash. He is not worth it." "I am not going to kill him," Russell said, though his expression suggested he would not mind doing exactly that. "I am just going to have a conversation, make sure he understands that you are not alone and unprotected anymore." "I will accompany you," Sheriff Martinez said. To ensure the conversation remained civil, the two men left together and Clara sank back into her chair, exhausted. Mrs. Henderson pressed a cup of tea into her hands. "Drink, dear. You have had quite a shock." "I thought I was free of him," Clara whispered. "I thought 2,000 miles would be enough." "Men like that," Desba said again, "they do not give up easily, but they are also cowards. Once they understand there is real opposition, real consequences, they retreat. Your husband and the sheriff will make him understand." Clara could only hope she was right. Russell and Sheriff Martinez found Frederick Carlyle at the hotel, sitting in the small lobby and looking distinctly out of place in his expensive Boston suit. He stood when they entered, his eyes narrowing. "I am looking for Miss Clara Caldwell," he said imperiously. "I was told she might be in this establishment." "There is no one by that name here," Russell said, his voice dangerously quiet. "However, there is a Mrs. Clara Davis, my wife. Perhaps you confused the names." Frederick's face flushed. "I think not. Clara Caldwell is my late wife's sister. She left Boston without permission, taking money that did not belong to her. I have come to retrieve her and settle the matter." "Your wife's sister," Sheriff Martinez repeated. "So no blood relation to you at all." "And what money are you referring to exactly?" "She stole $50 from my household accounts," Frederick said. "You have proof of this theft?" the sheriff asked. "Witnesses, documentation," Frederick faltered. "She lived in my household. She had access to my accounts." "That is not proof of theft," Russell said, "but I will tell you what is true. Clara saved her own money from sewing work. She used that money to travel here and begin a new life. She did not steal from you, but you certainly stole from her." "I do not know what lies she has been telling," Frederick began, his voice rising. "She told me about the bruises," Russell interrupted. "The ones you gave her when she refused your advances. She told me about how you cornered her in her room. How you told her no one would believe her if she reported you because you are a respected banker and she is just a poor orphan." Frederick's face had gone from flushed to pale. "She is a liar and a whore." Russell moved so fast that Sheriff Martinez barely had time to react. He grabbed Frederick by the throat and slammed him against the wall, his face inches from the other man's. "You will never speak about my wife that way again. You will not speak to her, write to her, or come near her. If I ever see your face in Santa Fe again, I will not bother with the sheriff. I will handle you myself. Am I clear?" Frederick nodded frantically, his face turning purple. Russell held him a moment longer, then released him with disgust. Frederick slumped against the wall, gasping. "There is a stage leaving for El Paso tomorrow morning," Sheriff Martinez said conversationally. "I suggest you be on it. If you are still in Santa Fe by noon tomorrow, I will arrest you for disturbing the peace. And trust me, sir, our jail is not comfortable for men accustomed to Boston luxuries." Frederick straightened his jacket with shaking hands. "This is not over." "Yes," Russell said flatly, "it is. Clara is my wife under the law. She is under my protection. You have no claim to her, legal or otherwise. Go home, Carlyle. Find someone else to terrorize. Because if you try to hurt her again, you will answer to me. And I promise you, I am not constrained by the same civilized conventions you rely on in Boston." The threat hung in the air, clear and unmistakable. Frederick looked between Russell's cold eyes and the sheriff's stern face, and whatever he saw there convinced him. He grabbed his bag and pushed past them, heading for the stairs to his room without another word. Outside, Sheriff Martinez clapped Russell on the shoulder. "That was well done. But you need to be careful. Men like that, they sometimes come back with lawyers or hired guns." "Let them come," Russell said. "I am not afraid of Carlyle or anyone he sends. Clara is mine to protect now, and I take that responsibility seriously." They returned to the Henderson house, where Clara was pacing anxiously despite the women's attempts to calm her. When Russell entered, she flew to him, and he caught her easily. "He is leaving town tomorrow," Russell said quietly. "The sheriff made it very clear he was not welcome. And I made it clear what would happen if he ever tried to contact you again." "Thank you," Clara whispered against his chest. "Thank you for protecting me." "Always," Russell promised. "From now until forever, I will always protect you." They rode back to the ranch in the gathering darkness. Clara pressed close to Russell's side on the wagon seat. She could not stop shaking, the confrontation with Frederick having unleashed all the fear she had been suppressing for months. Russell kept one arm around her shoulders, steady and warm, while he guided the horses with the other. "I need to tell you something," Clara said as they approached the ranch. "Something I should have said before." "You do not have to tell me anything," Russell said. "But I do," Clara insisted. "Because you deserve the truth. When I answered your advertisement, it was purely practical. I needed escape and safety, and you offered both. I did not expect kindness or consideration. I certainly did not expect to be happy. But Russell, these past weeks, I have been happier than I have been in years, maybe happier than I have ever been. You have given me not just safety, but a home, a purpose, a life worth living. I want you to know that this marriage, which started as a necessity, has become something precious to me." Russell pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house, but did not immediately move to get down. Instead, he turned to face Clara fully, his hands coming up to cup her face. In the moonlight, his eyes were dark and intense. "When I put that advertisement in the paper," he said slowly, "I told myself I was being practical. I needed help with the house and the cooking. I was lonely but too proud to admit it, and then your letter arrived, and something in it called to me. The way you wrote, the intelligence and humor despite the careful propriety. I knew before I ever met you that you were someone special. And when you stepped off that stage with that bruise on your face and fear in your eyes, I knew I would do anything to make you feel safe again. But it is more than that now, Clara. Somewhere in these past weeks, you have become essential to me. I look forward to coming home because you are there. I enjoy my meals more because you prepared them. The house feels warm and alive in a way it never did before. I think I am falling in love with you, and I need you to know that before anything else happens." Clara felt tears spill down her cheeks, but they were tears of joy this time, not fear or pain. "I think I'm falling in love with you too," she whispered. "I did not think I was capable of it anymore. Frederick made me feel broken, like I would never be able to trust or feel anything good again. But you have proven him wrong in every way." Russell leaned forward and kissed her, slow and sweet and full of promise. This was nothing like the brief, formal kiss at their wedding. This was a real kiss, the kind that spoke of desire and affection and futures entwined. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "We should go inside," Russell said, his voice rough. "Yes," Clara agreed, though neither of them moved immediately. Eventually, they climbed down from the wagon and went into the house. Miguel, Carlos, and Jim had already eaten and retired to the bunkhouse, leaving the main house quiet and private. Clara lit the lamps while Russell took care of the horses, and when he returned, she had set out some cold meat and bread for a late supper. They ate in comfortable silence, occasionally catching each other's eyes and smiling. The air between them felt charged with new awareness, the shift from friendly partnership to something deeper and more intimate. When the meal was finished, Clara washed the dishes while Russell banked the fire. The domestic routine had become familiar, but tonight it felt different, weighted with anticipation. "Clara," Russell said as she dried the last plate, "I want you to know that nothing has to change. You can still have your own room for as long as you want it." "I meant what I said about not expecting anything." Clara set down the plate and turned to face him. She was nervous but also certain. "What if I want things to change?" Russell's eyes darkened. "Are you sure?" "I am sure," Clara said. "I am sure about you, about us. I do not want to wait any more." Russell crossed the room and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that made her knees weak. She clung to him, matching his intensity, feeling desire kindle in her belly. When he swept her up into his arms and carried her toward his room, their room now, she did not protest. This was her choice made freely, with a man who valued and respected her. For the first time in her life, intimacy was something she wanted, not something to fear. The next morning, Clara woke wrapped in Russell's arms, sunlight streaming through the window. She felt different, transformed somehow. The fear that had lived in her chest for so long had finally loosened its grip. She was Clara Davis now, wife of Russell Davis, woman of the New Mexico territory, and she was happy. Russell stirred beside her and smiled when he saw her awake. "Good morning, wife." "Good morning, husband," Clara replied, testing out the words and finding she liked them. They lay together for a few more minutes, talking quietly about nothing and everything, before the demands of the day forced them to rise. Russell pulled on his clothes and headed out to start the chores while Clara dressed and began preparing breakfast. As she cooked, she found herself humming again, an old song from her childhood. The months that followed were filled with work and growth and deepening love. Frederick Carlyle never returned to Santa Fe, and Clara gradually stopped looking over her shoulder expecting to see him. The ranch prospered as fall turned to winter. Russell and his men brought the cattle down from the high country and prepared for the harsh season. Clara preserved vegetables from the garden and sewed warm clothes for everyone. Miguel's family arrived in early November. His wife Lucia and their 3 children, including 7-year-old Maria. Clara immediately began teaching Maria along with Jim and Carlos, delighting in the girl's quick mind and eager questions. Lucia proved to be a talented cook, and she and Clara spent hours exchanging recipes and techniques, blending Boston and Chihuahua traditions into something new and delicious. In December, Clara realized her monthly courses had not come. She waited another month to be certain, then told Russell the news on a cold January evening as they sat by the fire. His reaction was everything she could have hoped for. shock melting into joy, followed by immediate concern for her well-being. He became almost comically protective, trying to prevent her from doing any heavy work, until Clara firmly told him that pregnancy was not an illness. The baby was born in late August, almost exactly a year after Clara had arrived in Santa Fe. The labor was long and difficult, attended by Desba, who proved to have considerable skill as a midwife, and Mrs. Henderson, who provided moral support and cool cloths for Clara's forehead. Russell paced outside the bedroom like a caged animal until Lucia took pity on him and gave him some whiskey to calm his nerves. When Desba finally emerged and told him he had a son, Russell burst into the bedroom to find Clara exhausted but smiling, cradling a red-faced, squalling infant. "He is perfect," Russell breathed, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed and reaching out to touch his son's tiny hand. "You are perfect. I cannot believe we made this." "We did," Clara said softly. "He is ours." They named him Thomas Russell Davis, Thomas after Clara's father and Russell after his own. Little Thomas proved to be a healthy, energetic baby who demanded constant attention and gave nothing but joy in return. Clara had never imagined she could feel such overwhelming love for another person. She had thought perhaps she would love her children the way she had loved her sister, with affection and duty. But this was different. This was primal and fierce and all-consuming. Russell was a devoted father from the first moment. He held Thomas whenever Clara would allow it, rocking him to sleep and singing surprisingly tender lullabies in a voice that was usually so gruff. He changed diapers and paced the floor during colicky nights without complaint. Watching him with their son, Clara fell even more deeply in love with her husband. The years flowed by like water. Thomas grew from baby to toddler to boy, running wild around the ranch with Miguel and Lucia's children as his constant companions. Clara became pregnant again when Thomas was 2, and this time gave birth to a daughter they named Anne Catherine, after Clara's sister and herself. 2 years later, another son arrived, James Miguel, named partly for Jim Hawkins, who had died peacefully in his sleep the winter before, and partly for Miguel, who had become like a brother to Russell. The ranch prospered beyond Russell's early dreams. The cattle business was good, and he had a knack for buying low and selling high. He expanded the house, adding 2 proper bedrooms and a larger kitchen for Clara. He hired more men, all carefully vetted, creating a small community on the ranch. Clara started a school in one of the outbuildings, teaching not just the ranch children, but also several families from nearby homesteads. Her dream of being a teacher, abandoned so long ago, had come true in a way she never expected. Santa Fe grew and changed around them. The railroad arrived in 1880, bringing more settlers and commerce. The territory moved closer to statehood. Through it all, Clara and Russell built their life together, weathering droughts and harsh winters, celebrating births and mourning deaths, working side by side to create something lasting and good. On a warm evening in late summer of 1895, 10 years after Clara had arrived in Santa Fe, she and Russell sat on their porch watching the sunset. It was the same spectacular display of orange and purple that had taken her breath away that first week, and she still found it beautiful. Their children played in the yard before them. Thomas, nearly 10 and tall like his father, Anne, 8 and already showing signs of Clara's stubborn independence, and James, 6 and full of mischief. "You remember the day you arrived?" Russell asked, his arm around Clara's shoulders. "You looked so frightened stepping off that stage." "I was terrified," Clara admitted. "I thought I was running toward disaster. Instead, I was running toward home." "I knew the moment I saw you," Russell said, "that my life was about to change." I did not know how, but I knew nothing would ever be the same. Are you glad? Clara asked, though she knew the answer. Glad. Russell pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple. Clara, you saved my life as much as I saved yours. I was lonely and angry and turning into my father without realizing it. You brought light and love and laughter into my world. You gave me children and purpose and a reason to be better. I thank God every day that you answered my advertisement. And I thank God every day that you placed it, Clara said. And that when I arrived with a black eye and a past full of pain, you said that ends today and meant it. That was easy, Russell said. The hard part was waiting for you to trust me enough to let me love you. But it was worth the wait. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the sun sink below the distant mesas. Inside the house, Clara could hear Lucia singing in Spanish while she prepared supper. In the yard, the children's laughter rang out clear and joyful. From the bunkhouse, someone was playing a guitar, the notes drifting across the evening air. This was the life Clara had built from the ruins of her old one. A life full of love and work and simple pleasures. A life with a man who treated her as an equal partner, who valued her mind as much as her domestic skills, who loved her with a steadiness that never wavered. A life with children who would never know fear or hunger or the sting of an adult's hand, raised in anger. A life in the wild, beautiful country of New Mexico, where the sky stretched forever and anything seemed possible. Mama, Papa, Thomas called, running up to the porch. Mr. Martinez says he saw a family of foxes near the creek. Can we go look tomorrow? We will see, Russell said with a smile. First you need to wash up for supper. And finish your arithmetic homework, Clara added, laughing as Thomas groaned dramatically. As their son ran off to round up his siblings, Clara leaned her head on Russell's shoulder and felt complete contentment wash over her. The journey from that terrifying day in Boston to this peaceful evening in New Mexico had been long and difficult, but every hardship had been worth it to arrive here in this moment, surrounded by love. What are you thinking? Russell asked softly. That I am happy, Clara said simply. Truly, completely happy. Is that not amazing? Not amazing, Russell corrected. Deserved. You deserve every bit of happiness, Clara, and I plan to spend the rest of my life making sure you have it. He kissed her then, sweet and lingering, and Clara kissed him back with all the love in her heart. The children made exaggerated gagging noises from the yard, and they broke apart laughing. This was their life. Chaotic and beautiful, simple and profound, exactly what both of them needed. As the years continued to pass, Clara never forgot where she had come from or what she had survived. The scar tissue from Frederick's violence, both physical and emotional, never fully disappeared. There were still nights when she woke from nightmares, and Russell would hold her until the fear passed. There were still moments when a man's raised voice or sudden movement would make her flinch instinctively. But Russell was always patient, always gentle, always ready to remind her that she was safe. And gradually, the good memories outnumbered the bad. The nightmares came less frequently. The fear receded further into the past. Clara learned to trust not just Russell but herself, to believe that she was strong and capable and worthy of love. She watched her children grow with fierce protectiveness and determination, that they would never experience what she had endured. She taught them, especially her daughters, that they had value beyond what any man granted them. She raised her sons to respect women, to see them as equals, to understand that strength meant protecting those weaker, not dominating them. Russell supported her in all of this, proving by example what a good man looked like. He never raised his hand or his voice in anger to Clara or the children. He shared household duties without being asked, understanding that her work was as valuable as his. He encouraged the children's dreams, even when those dreams took them away from the ranch. When Thomas expressed interest in becoming a doctor, Russell sold cattle to pay for medical school. When Anne wanted to attend the university in Albuquerque, he supported her without question, despite the raised eyebrows of neighbors who thought higher education was wasted on girls. The ranch remained their home base, but it expanded beyond physical boundaries. Clara's school grew into a proper building funded by the territory, with Clara as head teacher. Russell served on the town council, using his influence to push for laws protecting women and children. Together, they became pillars of the Santa Fe community, known for their generosity and fairness. In 1905, 20 years after Clara's arrival, New Mexico moved closer to statehood. Russell was asked to attend a territorial convention in Santa Fe to discuss the proposed state constitution. Clara accompanied him, and they spent a week in town, attending formal dinners and political meetings. One evening at a reception at the governor's mansion, a distinguished older gentleman approached Clara. "Mrs. Davis," he said with a slight bow, "I wanted to introduce myself. I am Judge Harrison. I performed your marriage ceremony many years ago." "Of course," Clara said, smiling at the memory. "I remember. You seemed in quite a hurry that day." "I always was," Judge Harrison said with a chuckle. "Too many cases, not enough time, but I remember your wedding because of your husband's expression. He looked at you like you were the most precious thing in the world, even though I gathered you had only just met. I remember thinking that either he was a fool or he saw something special. I am glad to see it was the latter." "We were both lucky," Clara said, glancing across the room to where Russell was deep in conversation with several other ranchers. As if sensing her gaze, he looked up and smiled at her, that same warm smile that still made her heart skip a beat after 20 years. "Not luck," Judge Harrison said. "Luck is winning at cards. What you two have built is hard work and commitment and love. That is something far more valuable than luck." When Clara and Russell finally returned to the ranch after that week in town, they found everything running smoothly in their absence. Thomas, now a qualified doctor, had returned to Santa Fe to establish a practice and had been staying at the ranch. Anne was home from university for the summer, full of ideas and energy. James was helping Miguel's sons manage the cattle operation, proving to be a natural rancher like his father. "It is strange," Clara said to Russell as they lay in bed that night, "to realize that our children are grown, that the life we built here is continuing into the next generation." "Is it enough?" Russell asked. "Are you satisfied with what we have accomplished?" Clara turned to face him in the darkness. Even after 20 years, she never tired of looking at him. He was graying now, his face more lined, his body bearing the marks of decades of hard work. But to her, he was as handsome as the day they met. "More than enough," she said. "Russell, I arrived here with nothing but fear and desperation. You gave me a home, a family, a purpose. You gave me yourself. How could that ever not be enough?" "I just want you to be happy," Russell said simply. "I am," Clara assured him. "Every single day, I am grateful for the life we have built together. For you, for our children, for this place. All of it." They made love that night with the easy familiarity of long partnership, and afterward, Clara drifted to sleep in Russell's arms, feeling blessed beyond measure. The years continued their steady march. Grandchildren arrived, filling the ranch house with new laughter and chaos. Thomas married a nurse from his practice and gave Clara 3 grandchildren. Anne, breaking convention, traveled to Chicago to pursue journalism and sent long letters describing her adventures. James married Maria, Miguel's daughter, in a wedding that blended cultures and traditions beautifully, producing 2 more grandchildren. Clara and Russell grew older together, their hair silvering, their bodies slowing, but their love never diminishing. They still sat on the porch most evenings, watching the same spectacular sunsets. They still held hands across the dinner table. They still turned to each other first with every joy and sorrow. In the spring of 1915, on the morning of Clara's 55th birthday, Russell woke her with coffee and a small wrapped package. Inside was a beautiful silver locket. "Open it," Russell urged. Inside were two photographs, one of them on their wedding day, young and uncertain, the other from their 20th anniversary, surrounded by their children and grandchildren, confident and content. "Look at how far we have come," Russell said softly. "From two lonely, damaged people to this. A family, a legacy, a love that will outlast both of us." Clara felt tears streaming down her face as she looked at the photographs. "Thank you," she whispered, "for all of it, for saving me, for loving me, for giving me a life worth living." "You saved yourself," Russell said, pulling her close. "You had the courage to leave, to travel across the country, to trust a stranger. All I did was provide a safe place for you to become who you were always meant to be." They kissed, tender and sweet, and Clara knew that this was the truth at the heart of their story. Russell had not rescued her like some fairy tale prince. He had offered her safety and respect and partnership, and she had used those gifts to rebuild herself. Together, they had created something beautiful from broken pieces. As the years passed into the 1920s, the world changed rapidly around them. The Great War came and went, touching even distant New Mexico. Automobiles replaced horses on many roads, though Russell stubbornly maintained that a good horse was still more reliable than any machine. Radio brought news and entertainment into their home. New Mexico finally achieved statehood in 1912, and Russell lived to see the territory he loved become a full member of the Union. But through all the changes, the ranch remained constant. A place of hard work and simple pleasures, of family gathered around the dinner table, of sunsets that still took their breath away. Clara continued teaching until arthritis in her hands made writing on the blackboard too painful. Russell worked the ranch until the year he turned 75, when Thomas and James finally convinced him to let the younger generation take over the day-to-day operations. They spent their final years together in peaceful retirement, watching their grandchildren grow and occasionally great-grandchildren arrive. They traveled a bit, visiting Anne in Chicago and exploring parts of the West they had never seen. But they always came home to the ranch, to the land that had sheltered them and their love for so many years. On a warm evening in September of 1930, Russell and Clara sat on their porch as they had done thousands of times before. Russell was 85 now, his body frail but his mind still sharp. Clara was 70, her hair completely white but her eyes still bright with intelligence and humor. They held hands as they watched the sunset, the sky ablaze with color. "You remember," Clara said softly, "what you said the day I arrived, when you saw my bruised face." "That ends today," Russell quoted. "Of course I remember. It was the moment I committed to you before I even knew you." "You kept that promise," Clara said. "Every day for 45 years you kept that promise. The pain, the fear, the loneliness, all of it ended that day. You gave me a new beginning when I thought my story was over." "We gave each other new beginnings," Russell corrected. "I was as lost as you were, just in a different way. You brought joy and purpose to my life. You made me want to be better, to build something lasting. Our love saved us both." They sat in silence as the sun sank below the horizon and the first stars began to appear. Inside the house, they could hear their family, children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren who had gathered for Sunday dinner. Voices and laughter spilled out into the evening air, a symphony of love and continuity. "I am tired," Russell said eventually. "But it is a good tired, the tired of a life well lived." "Me too," Clara agreed. "I am ready whenever the time comes." "We have had more happiness than most people ever dream of." "No regrets?" Russell asked. "Not a single one," Clara said firmly. "Well, perhaps one, that we could not have more years together, but that is greedy, is it not? We have had 45 years, that is more than enough." Russell raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "I love you, Clara Davis. From the moment you stepped off that stage until my last breath, you are the great love of my life." "And you are mine," Clara whispered, "always and forever." They sat together until the sky turned fully dark, and their grandson James came out to help them inside. That night, they lay in bed holding each other, Russell's arms around Clara as they had been for decades. They talked softly about their life together, remembering the best moments, laughing over the challenges they had overcome, marveling at the family they had created. "Thank you," Russell said as sleep began to claim him, "for answering my advertisement, for trusting me, for building this life with me." "Thank you," Clara replied, "for seeing past my fear and pain to the woman I could become, for loving me well and truly, for giving me everything I never dared hope for." They drifted to sleep together, peaceful and content. Russell passed quietly in the early hours of the morning, his heart simply stopping while he slept. Clara woke to find him gone, and though her grief was deep and sharp, there was also gratitude. They had been granted a long and happy life together. They had loved deeply and been deeply loved in return. And Russell had gone peacefully, surrounded by family, having lived to see the fruits of their labor flourish. Clara lived for 5 more years, surrounded by the family she and Russell had created. She told stories about their early days to anyone who would listen, determined that the grandchildren and great-grandchildren should know the truth of their heritage. That their grandmother had arrived in New Mexico territory as a frightened, abused woman fleeing violence, and that their grandfather had been a lonely cowboy who saw past her bruises to the strong woman beneath. That together, they had built something beautiful and lasting from broken beginnings. When Clara died in her sleep in the spring of 1935, she was laid to rest beside Russell on the ranch they had shared for 50 years. The funeral was attended by more than 200 people, family, friends, former students, and townspeople whose lives had been touched by the quiet couple who had made such an impact on Santa Fe. At the reception after the funeral, Thomas stood to make a toast. "My parents," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "taught me everything worth knowing about love and commitment and building a life of meaning. My mother arrived here with nothing but courage and hope. My father gave her safety and respect and partnership. Together, they created a legacy that extends far beyond the walls of this ranch. They taught us that love is not about grand gestures or passionate declarations. It is about showing up every day, doing the work, choosing each other again and again. They taught us that past pain does not have to define our future, that we can rebuild ourselves and help others do the same. And they taught us that home is not a place, but rather the people we love and the life we build with them. So I ask you to raise your glasses to Clara and Russell Davis, 2 ordinary people who lived an extraordinary love story and changed all of our lives in the process." The toast was echoed by everyone present, and as they drank to the memory of Clara and Russell, the sun set over the ranch one more time, painting the sky in those familiar shades of orange and purple that had witnessed the beginning of their story so many years before. The ranch remained in the family for generations, passed down through the children and grandchildren who had learned the value of hard work and love from Clara and Russell's example. The house was expanded and modernized, But the original adobe core remained, a testament to the two people who had started it all. The porch where they had spent so many evenings together became a sacred space, where family members still gathered to watch the sunset and tell stories about the mail-order bride who arrived with a black eye and the lonely cowboy who said that ends today. Their story became legend in Santa Fe, told and retold until it took on the quality of myth. But those who had known Clara and Russell personally knew that the truth was even better than the legend. They had been real people who faced real challenges and chose love again and again, until it became the foundation of everything they built. Their legacy was not wealth or fame, but rather the family they had created and the lessons they had taught about resilience, respect, and redemption. And on warm September evenings, when the light hits the mesas just right and the sky erupts into color, people who visit the ranch still say they can feel the presence of Clara and Russell, forever watching the sunset together, forever grateful for the life they shared, forever proving that even the darkest beginnings can lead to the brightest endings if we have the courage to choose love.